Tonight, I say to the Russian oligarchs and the corrupt leaders who built billions of dollars off this violent regime, no more. The United States Department of Justice is assembling a dedicated task force to go after the crimes of the Russian oligarchs. We're joining with European allies to find and seize their yachts, their luxury apartments, their private jets. We're coming for your ill-begotten gains.
And President Biden is wasting no time making good on that promise. NBC News has learned that the administration could announce expanded sanctions against Vladimir Putin's cronies as soon as tomorrow. The intention here is that by squeezing Putin's inner circle, it could put pressure on the ex-KGB officer to stand down. Today, the Justice Department announced the task force that Biden alluded to.
We will leave no stone unturned in our efforts to investigate, arrest, and prosecute those whose criminal acts enable the Russian government to continue this unjust war.
For decades, these oligarchs have sheltered their extraordinary and in some cases stolen wealth outside of Russia in secret accounts and by acquiring vast amounts of real estate and other assets like yachts and private jets. As New York Times columnist Paul Krugman describes it, the sums involved are mind-boggling. Researchers estimate that in 2015, the hidden foreign wealth of rich Russians amounted to around 85% of Russia's GDP. Now, to give you some perspective, this is as if a U.S. president's cronies had managed to hide $20 trillion in overseas accounts. Wow. Joining me now is Hagar Chemali, a former spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the United Nations and the U.S. Treasury Department and host of Oh My World on YouTube. Thank you so much for being here. I think we're stealing you from Ali Velshi. I saw you talking with Ali, and it was a brilliant conversation, so I'm so glad that I can nick you from him because you were great. And I guess my first question is this, because Ambassador Michael McFaul earlier today, he made a really solid point, I think, that there are two kinds of oligarchs, right? They're the kind of oligarchs who, like, are stunning in Europe. They're in London. You know, they own lots of yachts, and they're moving their yachts right now and running away. And then there are the ones who own, like, the big oil conglomerates inside Russia, the Gazprom, the people behind things like that. So I wonder if these kinds of sanctions actually hit the ones who matter and the ones who need Putin. I'll just give you some examples. CNBC is reporting oligarchs are moving their yachts. The U.S. is looking to hunt down and freeze their assets. Roman Abramovich, one of them, is shopping the Chelsea Football Club to try to sell it. Are those even the oligarchs that count?
They all kind of count in different ways. And I mean, I see why the ambassador is dividing them into two, because he's talking about those that the former leader Boris Yeltsin had created. And one of President Putin's main arguments during campaigning against Boris Yeltsin was, look at the corruption he created, when it was hypocritical, because then he went ahead and created his own oligarchs and corruption. But at the end of the day, all of the oligarchs support President Putin and Putin's regime, and they all benefit equally from each other. They each need the other side. And so when you're targeting the oligarchs, it's not just about the possibility that they might convince President Putin to stop the aggression. It's getting at the possibility that President Putin might ask them to hide and evade his own assets. It's getting at the way they prop up President Putin himself personally, the regime, Russia's economy, obviously, which you alluded to. It's the idea of disrupting and dismantling all of the Kremlin's networks, financial networks. And so the Russian oligarch arm of that is a key aspect of it. A bonus of it would be if they convinced President Putin to change his mind.
How do you find the money, though? Because here's the thing, is that, I'm a layperson at this, but, it seems that Putin is good at hiding his wealth. There are people who've said he's a trillionaire, but nobody can find it. It's in all these LLCs. He finds all these creative accounting ways of hiding the money. I'm sure the ones who count, the Gazprom guys, whoever we want to get at, are also hiding their money. How do we find it?
Sure. Well, it's typical for these types of leaders and oligarchs to create these kind of very complicated ownership structures to hide their wealth, to not show who controls a bank account or business or who's the beneficial owner. And ultimately, the government's Treasury Department, in partnership with Europeans and others, hunt and find those assets. So the Treasury Department in particular has its own intelligence shop. In fact, it's the only finance ministry in the world that has its own intelligence shop. So it's all these intel analysts who collect and they don't collect, they receive information and analyze it with the only purpose of this mission to disrupt and dismantle these financial networks. And so anytime the U.S. Treasury sanctions a target, you can think of it as the center of an onion. And once it's sanctioned, they continue to hunt down and identify and expose that entire network because it's part of enforcing the sanction. So the idea that like it's a name on a press release and that's it just doesn't work like that. They map out the whole network and they work with the private sector to ensure that if there's a bank account or a business that they're not aware is owned, in fact, by President Putin or one of these oligarchs, they will either publicly sanction that business or bank account or whatever later on, or depending on what it is, they may go to the financial institution directly and say, hey, you may not be aware, but this is who actually owns this account.
What are the chances that some U.S. players get uncovered? When you start uncovering where people are hiding their money, there have been lots of stories about straw donations that have gone into, I don't know, some Republican coffers here and there. Some senators have been named, maybe, we don't know. Like, is there a possibility that this hunt turns up some Americans who are maybe doing business? Do we find out, oh, Donald Trump or somebody else is doing business with them? And if that information comes up and it's Americans or straw donors that are in the United States, what happens to them?
It's always a possibility. It's not something that Treasury pursues. Usually when things like this have happened, you've had, for example, leaks like the Panama Papers. And those documents ended up unleashing and exposing all sorts of individuals who were involved in shady financial structures and transactions and so on. So you may end up having something like that. But if an American person is involved, it's not usually the Treasury Department that handles it. That's usually that falls then to law enforcement, so the Department of Justice and the FBI. And what they do, that's more money laundering, for example. If they're involved in money laundering or corruption, these are against U.S. law. And so it's a legal procedure that ends up taking place after that.
And then we go right back to the DOJ that won't even prosecute Donald Trump, but then that's a whole nother conversation. And I guess the last question would be, let's say that one of these oligarchs has, lots of yachts or they've got some sort of property that gets seized in this process. What does the Treasury Department do with it? Do they sell it? Does the money go to the, into the American coffers? Like, what happens to these properties?
Yes, the seizure of any kind of criminal assets goes to a slush fund for future law enforcement activities. So usually, yes, they'll probably sell off the assets, but any proceeds made from that or any cash, all of it goes into a slush fund for future law enforcement activity. And
what we're showing you there on the screen, we can put it back up, is 6 oligarchs. Oleg Deripaska, you've probably heard a lot on the Rachel Maddow show. She's talked a lot about some of these guys: Len Blavatnik, Alexei Kuzmichev, Eugene Schwindler, Dmitry Rybolovlev, you might have heard as well. Total cost of the real estate they own just in this country, in New York City alone, $588 million. So we're talking big, big money. Hagar Chemali, don't make too many plans for the 7 p.m. hour weekdays, Monday through Friday. You're great. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here tonight.